Let's take this passage, and this passage came in CAT 2019, and the passage came in the first slot of CAT 2019, and we will read the passage first. We will try to understand what exactly has the author to say, and then we will go ahead and take the questions. So let's look at the first paragraph. The author says, as defined by the geographer Tuan, topophilia is the affective bond between people and place. His 1974 book set forth a wide-ranging exploration of how the emotive ties with the material environment vary greatly from person to person and in intensity, subtlety, and mode of expression. So when you look at the first a few lines of the passage, you will find that the author has introduced the word topophilia, and the word topophilia, as the word suggests, the word topo means topography, and the word philia means love or attachment. So it is basically attachment for a particular place. So the word itself explains the topic that the author wants to discuss in the passage. And he says that there is emotive ties with the material environment, and it varies greatly from person to person in intensity, subtlety, and mode of expression. Factors influencing one's depth of response to the environment include cultural background, gender, race, and historical circumstance. And Tuan also argued there is a biological and sensory element. Topophilia might not be the strongest of human emotions. Indeed, many people feel utterly indifferent towards the environments that shape their lives. But when activated, it has the power to elevate a place to become the carrier of emotionally charged events or to be perceived as a symbol. So the author basically says that this is topophilia and how it varies from people to people and what things determine topophilia, right? So this is what the first para is all about. Broadly, it's an introduction of the word topophilia and what things go in shaping topophilia. Let's go and take the second paragraph. So in the second paragraph, the author says that aesthetic appreciation is one way in which people respond to the environment. A brilliantly colored rainbow after gloomy afternoon showers, a busy city street alive with human interaction. One might experience the beauty of such landscapes that had seemed quite ordinary only moments before or that are being newly discovered. This is quite the opposite of a second topophilic bond, namely that of the acquired taste for certain landscape. When a place is home or when a space has become the locus of memories or the means of gaining a livelihood, it frequently evokes a deeper set of attachments than those predicted purely on the visual. So what we get to know here is a third response. It says here, then aesthetic appreciation. So there is also a second response somewhere the author has used the word, this is unique with human beings, right? So if you look at the author, he discusses the different kinds of responses, right? He says aesthetic appreciation is one way, a brilliantly colored rainbow, and so on and so forth. And then he says this is quite the opposite of a second topophilic bond, named the acquired taste. So there are different responses, and that has come in the second paragraph. We will not bother about what exactly is going on, because if you are a good reader, you will simply capture what is broadly discussed by the author. So there are different bonds or responses which can be called topophilic, and the author has discussed these in the second paragraph. I will go to the third paragraph, and he says here that topophilia and its very close conceptual twin sense of place is an experience that, however elusive, has inspired recent architects and planners. So now in the third paragraph, the author seems to be discussing how topophilia has inspired architects. Most notably, new urbanism seeks to counter the perceived placelessness of modern suburbs and the decline of central cities through neo-traditional design motives. Although motivated by good intentions, such attempts to create places rich in meaning are perhaps bound to disappoint. So the author seems to be saying that topophilia as a sense of guiding light for designing architecture might disappoint, according to the author. Now this is very important. So you always have to read the passage with the negatives and the positives that have come across the passage. He says, as Tuan noted, purely aesthetic responses often are suddenly revealed, but their intensity rarely is long lasting. Topophilia is difficult to design for and impossible to quantify. So the author says because topophilia is difficult to design and impossible to quantify, he says that attempts to create places rich in meaning are perhaps bound to disappoint. Maybe that could be the reason. So here the author has discussed topophilia and how this has inspired architects. And he says that it might disappoint because, according to the author, topophilia is difficult to design and impossible to quantify. And he has given examples of Henry David, who had liking for a Walden pond, and Tuan described his deep affinity for the desert. So different people have different kind of likings, and that's the reason why topophilia is difficult to design. And towards the end, the author says topophilia connotes a positive relationship, but it often is useful to explore the darker affiliations between people and place. Patriotism, literally meaning the love of one's terra patria, has long been cultivated by governing elites for a range of nationalist projects, including war preparation and ethnic cleansing. Residents of upscale residential developments have disclosed how important it is to maintain their community's distinct identity, often by casting themselves in a superior social position and by reinforcing class and racial differences. And just as a beloved landscape is suddenly revealed, so too may landscapes of fear cast a dark shadow over a place that makes one feel a sense of dread or topophobia. So the author towards the end discusses topophilia and its negative thing. He says that topophilia connotes positive relationship, but is often used to explore the darker affiliations. And then he discusses what those darker affiliations could mean. And then he says, that there could be social differences, racial prejudice, and so on and so forth. And he concludes the passage by talking about topophobia. He has just minutely introduced the word topophobia. So when you read the passage, you get a feeling that the passage is primarily about topophilia, where the author has discussed topophilia in the first paragraph. In the second paragraph, he talks about the different kinds of responses. In the third para, he speaks about architects and planners and how their inspiration may disappoint us because of some reasons. And then he talks about the negative aspects of topophilia. So that is how you map the passage, and you should do this every time you read a passage, so that you have a broad understanding of the passage, and you know that if the question comes from a certain area, you can go to that area of the passage and try to find the answer. So now we have the questions with us. Let's read the questions and take them one by one. So here the question which we have as a first question, it says the word topophobia in the passage. So the word topophobia, we know, has come at some specific paragraph. And as the word topophobia itself describes, it would be the exact opposite of love of a place, because topophilia is love of a place, and so topophobia is basically fear of a place. So even without reading the passage, you can simply go by the vocabulary and say to represent a feeling of dread towards particular spaces and places. So it is not about the fear of studying something. It's not the fear of studying. It is the fear of dread towards a place, right? And all these simply go out. I would say an easy question. You can directly get answers even without reading the passage. So you have an easy question to begin with, right? So let's go and take the second question. The second says, which of the following statements, if true, could be seen as not contradicting the arguments in the passage? Now this will take time, because you have to read all the four options and then go with the one that is not contradicting the passage. Now if you look at the word, it is not contradicting. That means basically there are three options which contradict and one that is not contradicting, and that is bound to become the right answer. So many a time we might miss the word not, correct? So you have to not contradict basically means one option is correct and the others are out because they are against what is given in the passage. So let's read the options and try to see where these options might be located in the passage, because we have read the whole passage and these four options could have come from four different corners of the passage. So it is very important for us to go to the right area and read the right part so that we arrive at the answer, or we finish verifying the answer in a shorter amount of time, right? So one says the most important, even fundamental response to our environment is our tactile and olfactory response. So tactile olfactory response has come somewhere in the second paragraph, because the types of response was discussed there, right? So the author says, that the olfactory and the word was clearly visible somewhere. So he says aesthetic appreciation. He says a third response to the environment also depends upon human senses, but maybe tactile and olfactory, namely a delight. So it is a third kind of response, right? So third kind of response basically means not the highest. because it says aesthetic appreciation is one in which people respond to the environment, so on and so forth. And he says this is quite the opposite of second topophilic bond, namely that of acquired taste. When a place is home, and then it says a third response to the environment also depends upon human senses. So the author has basically categorized them, right? And he says basically one is of the visual. He says that that attachments that those predicted purely on the visual. A third response to the environment depends upon the human senses, but maybe tactile. So basically visual is higher than tactile, olfactory, and above this you have something more. So the author has given a hierarchy of this responses, right? And definitely the olfactory and tactile has come in the third order. So when you look at the option, it says the most important, even fundamental response. Now this is basically contradicting the passage, because it is not the fundamental and the most important. In fact, the author has not said, he has simply said the third category. So we can't simply say it is the most important, whereas the author has not mentioned this. So this is basically contradicting the passage, right? So this goes out. He says, then generally speaking, in a given culture, the ties of the people to their environment vary little. Very little basically means don't vary much. But this thing has come in the paragraph. The author has said categorically that that many people feel utterly indifferent. And he says that he has clearly said that environment vary greatly from person to person. So the emotive ties with the material environment varies greatly from person to person. So how can we say that it varies little when the author says varies greatly? So this also goes out. And then third says patriotism, usually seen as a positive feeling, is presented by the author as a darker form of topophilia. So when you look at patriotism, whether it is the darker form of topophilia or not, we can check that. And he has said towards the end that topophilia connotes patriotism, literally meaning the love of one's terra patria homeland, has long been cultivated by the governing elites for a range of nationalist projects. So this also can be considered as one of the choices that is not contradicting, because the author has given this choice as if it is in favor, right? So if you look at the third paragraph, the author has discussed that how patriotism has been used to create rift between people. And so patriotism, usually seen as a positive feeling, is presented by the author as a darker form of topophilia. It is, yes, it is presented, and therefore this is basically not contradicting the passage. And new urbanism succeeded in those designs where architects collaborated with their clients. So let's have a look at the other choice. So we know that option 3 is the right answer, because option 3 is true as per the passage, and therefore it is not contradicting the arguments of the passage. So once you have got 3, there is no need for you to move at 4. But some people might want to cross check and say that where exactly is 4 located in the passage. It says new urbanism succeeded in those designs. But the author has said, and he has again mentioned this, he said that most notably, new urbanism seeks to counter the perceived placelessness of modern suburbs, although motivated by good intentions. Such attempts to create rich in meaning are perhaps bound to disappoint. So the author says that they are bound to disappoint, and the passage says, and the option says that new urbanism succeeded in those designs where architects collaborate with their clients. So if it is succeeding, then it is definitely going against what the author has to say, because the author has said it is bound to disappoint. But if the option says that it is succeeding, that means you are contradicting the author, but you have to mark for not contradicting, so also 4 goes out. So it is very important for you to understand what exactly has the question asked. The question has asked to pick an option that is in agreement with what the author has given, and to rule out those which is contradicting the author. And 4 is definitely contradicting the author, because the author says are bound to disappoint, but here you have new urbanism is succeeding. So you have to be very smart with respect to option elimination, right? So we have got the second question, relatively easy question, we would say. You have to just find the answer. Look at the third one. It says in the last paragraph, the author uses example of residents of upscale residential developments to illustrate. So let's go and check upscale. So last para basically has talked about the negativity of topophilia, right? So if you read the last paragraph carefully, the author has said that residents of upscale residential developments have disclosed how important it is to maintain their community's distinct identity, often by casting themselves in a superior social position. So basically, people have used topophilia to create some kind of discrimination. So you have to pick the one which is the best and the closest to what the author wants to say. So he says introduction of nationalist projects. It is not a nationalist project. So it can be social exclusivism, because nationalist project is something which is excessive patriotism for, or excessive love for one's country. That is not what the author says. Author says residents of upscale residential developments have disclosed how important it is to maintain their community's distinct. So it is not the country's identity, but the community's identity, by showing that you are in a superior social position. So you are basically practicing some kind of social segregation and not nationalistic. So social exclusivism is the correct choice. Social exclusivism practiced by such residents in order to enforce sense of absolutely precisely what the author wants to say. So I think once you see this option, there is no need for you to go and check the other choices. Option 1 goes out because of nationalist projects. Option 2 can be selected because social segregation and reinforcing social class is precisely what option 2 says. Manner in which environments are designed. So again, it is not about the environments. This is again not the choice. Sensitive response to race and class problems. It is not a sensitive response. It is basically an arrogant response. Sensitive response would mean that a response in which you are considering something and trying to accommodate. You are more tolerant. But here intolerance is coming out openly. So fourth is not the right choice, definitely. So option 2 is the best choice and the right answer. Let's go ahead and take fourth question, right? So the fourth question says that which of the following best captures the meaning of the statement topophilia is difficult to design and impossible to quantify. So if you read this part, we know that it has come somewhere in the second part of the passage, where the author has said that topophilia is difficult to design for and impossible to quantify. And the reason the author says is that, and he has given an example that although there is no direct answer, but from the example we can make out why the author is mentioning this. The author says topophilia is difficult to design for and impossible to quantify because there is one person, Henry David, who had intricate sense of place at Walden Pond, and then Tuan himself has deep affinity for the desert. So when people have different liking for different things, it is very difficult to design topophilia. The question says which of the following best captures the meaning. So can we say that one is the best choice because people's responses to their environment are usually subjective and cannot be rendered? Why subjective? Because one person will like one thing and different person will like different thing. So you might appreciate the heat of a particular place, whereas some other guy might appreciate the coldness of that place and not the heat. So different people will have different preferences and liking, and that's the reason why it is difficult to design. If they have to objectively quantify, then it is possible. So if you can objectively quantify, then why it cannot be possible? It should be possible. So 3 is making a statement exactly opposite of what the author has to say. And philosopher architects are uniquely suited to develop topophilic design. So they may go ahead. It is not about philosopher architects. The author has given the example of philosophers to show that one philosopher has a liking for one kind of landscape and the other philosopher has liking for the other kind of landscape. So the point is that it is difficult to say to come to any kind of uniformity as to what people like. So this also goes out. So the best choice is one which is the logical and the closest to what the author wants to discuss in the passage. Let's go ahead and take the fifth question, the last for this passage. It says, which of the following comes closest in meaning to the author's understanding of topophilia? So this question is the exact opposite of question number 1. In question number 1, we had topophobia. In question number 2, we have topophilia. So it must be love, right? Love of place and people. The tendency of many cultures to represent their land as motherland or fatherland may be seen as expression of the topophilia. So it sounds good, can be one of the choices. 2 says nomadic societies are known to have the least affinity for the lands through which they traverse because they tend to be topophobic. They might have least affinity and therefore they may not have topophilia, but definitely they will not have topophobia. Nomadic societies will not have topophilia because they keep on moving. But what is the reason for their developing topophobia? This is something which the passage has not even discussed. And we have to answer for topophilia, not for topophobia. So this also goes out. The French are not very overly, if they're not patriotic, then there is no topophilia. This also goes out. Sense of topography is not the same as topophilia. Sense of topography means feeling of a place. So when you have a sense of topography, you know that you are at this geographical location, and when you go to a different geographical location, you will easily be able to map. So topography and topophilia are two different things. So they have to. So option 1 is bound to be the right choice simply by elimination. There is no need to find the answer, right? So we have done all the questions, and I would say that in CAT 19, in the first slot, you could have got all 5 questions correct from this passage. Surprisingly, people found the paper very tough.
Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get notifications of future videos.